What leverage, though, does President Trump realistically have to stop Israel if Netanyahu were to pursue the annexation anyway?
I think the U.S. has a lot of leverage. Of course, we have more leverage than any other country in the world. The question is whether we would actually use it. And what are the levers that we have? We could cut off U.S. weapons support to Israel. We could cut off U.S. aid to Israel. We could cut off intelligence sharing to Israel. We could also use sanctions, and this administration does like to use sanctions, and most of the previous administrations have resorted to sanctions to try to change behavior by other countries. So all of those things are possible for the United States to do, and Israel would be all alone if the U.S. abandoned it and put in place some of those measures.
You just said the question is whether we utilize any of those levers. Do you think we get to that point?
I'm not sure. I think that this is an issue that is actually pretty divisive inside the Trump administration. There are those who would like to see the president take a harder stance against Netanyahu, and then there are those who want to just back Israel no matter what it does. So there's going to be a policy debate inside the Trump administration, and I'm not sure how that is going to resolve.
I want you to take a listen for me for a second. Go back to Netanyahu's speech this week earlier in the UN, and then I have a question for you after.
They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job.
Yeah, so you hear, obviously, Netanyahu being really firm there, but I am curious, in his meeting with President Trump on Monday, do you see Netanyahu trying to smooth things over or continuing to double down?
So that was the most important part of Netanyahu's speech, in my opinion, that you just played, because that's him making the case for why, despite the criticism from around the world, Israel must continue to fight in Gaza and to hunt down every militant member of Hamas. I think that he will have some, support for that position when in his meetings with President Trump and with the Trump administration. There are those who believe that as well, who are very strong against terrorism and believe that it's acceptable for Israel to have as a goal to kill every Hamas member or bring them to justice. But I think there's also a huge level of frustration, and there's pressure, not just from our Western allies, but also remember the Trump administration has moved closer to the Gulf countries in the Middle East, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, for instance. And I'm sure those three countries are also putting a lot of pressure on President Trump to take a harder stance against Israel.
Yeah, we know those three countries and really the world will be watching that meeting between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. Former State Department official David Tafuri, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, danger.